Retro video games are too expensive. Now, there's something that you hear all the time, and sure enough, something you hear far less often is people saying, gosh, I love spending more than I have to on old video games. And maybe it's just the people I hang around, but actually, I don't think I've ever heard that. All making for a fair question to ask, how much should retro video games cost? Well, the simple answer would be to just say whatever people are willing or not willing to pay will determine what they're worth, because it does. That's how a market works. Here's the problem with that though. What you're willing to pay and how much you think you should have to pay are two totally different things. And forget buyer's remorse, unless we feel like we're getting a good deal on something, we probably feel like we paid too much. Just take a quick gander at your game collection real quick, and I bet you can tell me at least one game cost you more than you think it should have. What I find to be most interesting though is the idea that because they are older, they should cost less. I mean, that's how most things work. The price of something is at its highest right when it comes out and then goes down from there. But that's assuming people will care about it less and less as time goes on. Check out this old garbage can of mine. Let's just say its glory days of sitting on the shelf at Bed Bath & Beyond with a shiny price sticker of $29.99 are now in the past. Thing is, interest for something fading over time just doesn't happen with everything, with retro video games being at the top of the list. Besides still being desirable, things can become collectible. When you buy a retro video game, you're not just purchasing the rights to play the game, you're purchasing the ability to own a piece of video game history with the added benefit of being able to play it in the original format that it was released, and a hoping chance that it'll impress people as you have it casually featured in some YouTube videos. Unfortunately for all of us, the supply of these older games at places like retail stores has been cut off, so whatever was produced back in the day is what we have to work with now. Sure, a lot of older games get re-released for newer hardware, either digitally or physically, and even though it's the same thing in theory, it's not. There's always going to be people who want to own games in their older formats. Perhaps not everybody though, as I've noticed that sometimes when an older game gets re-released on something newer, you'll see the price temporarily go down, but sure enough, almost always the price will eventually go back up again. I think one of the biggest distinguishing factors when it comes to what these older games are worth is whether we're talking about collectors or people who just want to play the games. Not that collectors don't also want to play the games, but if all you want to do is play the game, then you have far more options available to you. Especially nowadays, as time goes on, the more ways there are to play. For a lot of these methods, the games don't exist within a finite supply that need to be tracked down physically either. By far the biggest issue with collecting games in their older formats. Demand by itself won't make prices go any higher, whatever that demand may be, so long as the supply can hold up. But as soon as the supply can't hold up, prices are going to have an absolute joyride rocketing on up. Sure, there are some games that get re-released in their older format, but certainly not everything, and those releases are usually limited. The thing is that older games are at a disadvantage, since supply won't be replenished the way something newer usually will be. When something current is being sold, if it sells out, then it's usually not that big of a deal because it'll probably get restocked. When Amazon is sold out of Scrub Daddies online, I know I don't have a Scrub Daddy crisis because those Scrub Daddies will be back in stock at some point. But with older games, no cigar, my friend. You're stuck with dealing with the secondhand market. Okay, but since collectors are stuck with the secondhand market, and we know that many of them are indeed willing to spend money on these games, let's take a look at things from their perspective. So here's the thing that's interesting about video games. We don't need them. Well, maybe we actually do need them, but it's not like our bodies would start failing like they would if we stopped eating food or stopped drinking water. Or would they? Point is, video games are something that we choose to buy, and therefore choose to spend a certain amount of money on, whether we think it should be cheaper or not. If you have to pay thousands of dollars to get a part of your home fixed because it'll collapse on you if you don't, for most responsible adults, that's not much of a decision. You kind of just have to do it. When faced with the decision of whether or not you should spend a bunch of money on on an older video game, a lot of us just say, yeah, screw this, and life goes on. And yet, some people are willing to dish out the cash for certain games. Why? Well, as with any optional purchase, you spend the money because you think it'll be worth it. And yeah, even if it's more than you think it should be. I buy bananas for 20 cents a nanner, which seems about right to me, but if they cost 50 cents a nanner, I'd probably still pay it because I just love nanners that much and it would still be worth it to me. So when it comes to buying older games, it comes down to how badly you want it, not to mention how much disposable income you have and how willing you are to cut back on other things in favor of video games. Then of course there is also condition, not only cosmetic condition, but what comes with the game. Box, manual, dust because the seller is too lazy to just do a simple wipe down. All of this factors into the price. When it comes to cosmetic condition, as you would assume, the better the condition, the more it can typically sell for. Most buyers will be okay with at least a little bit of wear from being played, but if the wear becomes significant in any sort of way, it tends to hurt the value. Sure, some people are okay with a little more cosmetic wear than others, but usually a big reason why is so they don't have to spend as much money on it. As for all the stuff that can come with the game that isn't actually the game itself, this could be valuable to a person for a number of reasons. Perhaps it's because it makes the game feel more complete, or perhaps they actually want to read or look at those items. In general, it would make sense that using something is a great reason for wanting to have something, but not so fast there, folks. You see, if we really want to increase the value of games for certain people who are, let's just call them big game hunters, the trick is to make games as unusable as possible. Keeping a game sealed is one step that can be taken, but that seal could be broken and opened up in like 10 seconds. You gotta push things even further and have it put into a hard plastic case. Now we're talking. That should do a much better job of keeping anybody out who wants to play the game and just screams, please don't ever try to use me as intended. You know, if being unusable can be a feature of a valuable game, then why not just smash your games with a hammer? You think we can create a market for games like that? Who's with me? But perhaps more than anything, sealed games help to demonstrate just how much what people value ranges all over the place depending on the individual. So yeah, this video isn't about saying a video game is worth this amount of dollars. Any dollar amount you came up with would just be arbitrary anyways. I suppose you could go by whatever a game initially retailed for as some sort of baseline, but if you did that and factored in inflation, a lot of older games would still be super expensive. What I will say though is that ideally money wouldn't be a barrier to playing these older games. Somebody not being able to play something because it costs too much really sucks, and elitist attitudes from people who either can or do spend the money shaming other people who either can't or simply won't is a total garbage attitude that's not helping anybody. That's not to say spending money on games is wrong though. If somebody is willing to spend a certain amount of money on a game, then they're entitled to do what they want with their money. What's unfortunate is that because older games exist in a secondhand market, when the asking price of a game goes up, it goes up for everybody. So regardless of what we think a game should cost as individuals, we're stuck with whatever it is that other people are willing to pay. Unless you're able to get games either for free or from somebody not interested in selling games at the current market prices, which is often easier to wish for than actually have happen. But with all this said, I'd be curious to hear what some personal opinions are when it comes to what games should cost. And since all of you watching are personal people, your thoughts are going to be just the ticket. With enough opinions, even though they'll probably fluctuate quite a bit, I think we can get a more general idea of where retro gamers stand on this subject. So, for those thoughts or any other thoughts you may have, leave your comments down below and I will see ya in the next video.
He's the retro bird, yeah, and he's talking about video games. He's